Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 13th episode of the Survival Project. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Duckett. Daniel lives with an ostomy. He's an award-winning baker. You should see the croissants they make up there. And he's an openly gay man who's built a life filled with confidence, creativity, and honesty. His story brings a powerful mix of humour, insight, and resilience, and he speaks brilliantly about body image, dating, identity, and the reality of rebuilding your life and sense of self after chronic illness and surgery. Before we begin, I want to say a big thank you to Salt's Healthcare for supporting today's episode. Their backing allows conversations like this to reach more people in need of them, and I'm very, very grateful for their support. So let's get into it. So Daniel, thank you so much for being here. Would you mind delving into your story for us?
So, yeah, I am originally from Alabama. The accent will probably come and go as we go through this podcast. But I have been here for 16 years. But my story starts 30 years ago, right? The day after Christmas, as a matter of fact, Boxing Day, 1995. I passed out in an elevator at my mom's work, and my mom was a nurse. So, for some reason, we had gone with her to pick up her paycheck. And by this point, I was extremely ill. I had been losing loads of blood through bloody stools, didn't really have an idea of what was going on. But being a 15-year-old boy, you don't really talk about those sort of things. And so it came to a head in that elevator. Lost consciousness, pooed my pants. Everybody starts freaking out. So they pick me up. The elevator doors open into the emergency department, luckily. So I'm rushed in there. They get the drips going. They kind of bring me back to consciousness. Of course, my mind's going to where are my clothes? Why are my pants not on? What's going on here? And at that point, there's clearly something wrong. They can see the blood as well. They take some blood to figure out what my blood levels are. They come back and say, right, we're going to get you on some blood transfusions because you're severely anemic. And that just started the ball rolling with my disease. It was confusing. I didn't know what was going on. My mom did because she was a pediatric nurse. She's familiar with everything. They came back with a diagnosis of ulcerative colitis at the start. And mom was very relieved because she knew that, of the two that you need to be diagnosed with, that's the lesser of the two evils. And so I spent about a week and a half, 2 weeks in hospital, and then got sent home on, I can't even remember which drugs it was at this point. They sort of kind of worked to keep things under control for a few months. Then I got sick again. They did a few more scopes. I was starting to develop pseudo polyps in my colon. So by this time I'm 16, and they decide that it's probably just best to go ahead and remove my entire colon. And mom is very medically savvy. She's telling me what's going to happen. I'm getting very, intelligent with my medical care at 16 because I've been in and out. And we go and see a surgeon, and he recommends that they do a J pouch, which was, I don't know how long it had been around at that time, but the standard treatment was to form the pouch, give you a diverting ileostomy, and then take that down whenever you're sort of healed up. Well, I was a very active teenager. I was a lifeguard. I would cycle. I was in gymnastics. I was in taekwondo. So I was very physically fit despite the ulcerative colitis. So the surgeon's in, digging around, removing things, and I wake up from surgery, reach down, and there's no ostomy. I was really confused because I was, at 16, I was prepared for this. I was reluctant but prepared. And they explained the surgeon just thought you were healthy enough not to need one. Hindsight being what it is, it's probably the worst decision they could have done because that just started a waterfall of other problems. About a year and a half later, I started developing pouchitis, had blood clots, high fevers, ulcers in my mouth, was just really, really unwell. Went back into hospital. They did a few more looky-loos. I was on clear liquid diet at one point, all sorts of steroids, and it all kind of runs together in my head throughout my teenage years because I was in and out so much. Missed school, but I was very determined to kind of keep up, so I did work from home to go like some weird intelligent kid. Most kids would have been like, oh, I'm grateful to be off school and, just kind of bunk off and fall behind and take the year off. I was so determined to graduate with my class, was learning Spanish on videotapes, the homework in. Meanwhile, being sick, the whole time I was sick. So I ended up graduating with my class. I was really proud of that. But my senior pictures, I've got the moon face. I'm heavily on steroids. Couple this all with, growing up in the South in a very Christian home and also kind of sort of figuring out my sexuality. It was just kind of a crazy time. And so I start my first semester at university, and that was probably a mistake to even consider really going into it because I knew that things weren't going well. I was starting to develop a fistulous tract that got inflamed. I could barely sit down. People were noticing how I was sitting down. It was very ginger. It was very cautious because things were sore. And the night before I was supposed to go on a trip, I told my mom, I said, look, things aren't right. I need to show you this. Of course, it's in an area that's very sensitive. It's very, when you're 18 years old, you don't really want to be showing your mom right underneath your private parts. She's a nurse. We're used to it. And I showed her, and she was like, right, you're not going anywhere. We're going to get you to the hospital. Here we go again. That ended up turning into about a 2 week stay in the hospital. They had to go in, drain the tract. At that point, the doctor was a bit gregarious. I would almost say he was a little bit of a cowboy. Put a central line in my neck, which I had no idea was going to happen. I wake up from surgery and I can barely move my head because my neck is so sore. And I can remember it being like right in there and just how stiff it was. And it just looked Frankenstein. So that was one more thing I had to deal with at 18, missing my first semester of school. Had to formally withdraw me. And fortunately, at that time is when Remicade was coming out. I can't remember I think it's infliximab. This is the one you actually go in and get the infusion for about 2 or 3 hours. That was proposed to us and said, look, this is a new drug. These are the risks. These are the benefits. It's specifically for people who have fistulous Crohn's. It might help. I go in, I have this sort of induction series of infusions, and it's like night and day. Like, it gives me such relief from this tract. This tract starts closing. I'm starting to heal up. I'm starting to feel well. I'm like, okay, here we go. Here we go. So I re-roll in university, go back. I'm only kind of like a semester behind at this point. So I'm not really, missing too much. And so get in, start having fun in university. I'm getting these infusions and they turn my life around. They actually allow me to really come into myself. This point, I come out of the closet. Mom, being a conservative Christian woman, was a bit, I wouldn't say horrified, but she was very disappointed. And one of my classmates was like, you didn't just come out of the closet, you busted open the door hinges. Because I was letting loose. This was the life that I had not had in my teenage years because I was sick. And now that I'm feeling really, really good, I'm going to the club on the weekends. I'm starting to drink a lot. I never really did anything too irresponsible. I never really drank during class and wasn't this bad kid, but I did waste my university years because I was really good in high school. I made really good marks. And I've got my transcript from college, and it's like you can clearly see that I was more focused on living life than I was studying, which I think, given the background that I had been through, was understandable. But there was one point where this is the American health system. You have to kind of get pre-approval for some of your infusions. The pre-approval didn't come in time. And so everything's starting to act up again. I'm starting to not get, I'm starting to get sicker and sicker. And I'm just like, come on, come on, come on. Get me in here so that I can get this infusion. And I ended up having to drop another semester, had to withdraw kind of close to the end of the semester. So that was very frustrating. But then I got back to feeling better. I ended up graduating only like a semester behind. So I was able to kind of catch up with everything. After university, I continued to work, had a full-time job, was feeling great, had bought a brand new car because I had a brand new job. And so was continuing just to live life, go out, be an out proud gay man, go to the clubs, have boyfriends. And the infusions were really keeping everything under control. And so I decided, right, it's time to flee and fly the nest. I am leaving America. Not America, sorry, my hometown, Montgomery. Went and lived in the bigger city, Birmingham, which is about 90 miles north. And so there I was actually able to even really come into myself even more because I didn't have my parents or grandparents around. I could kind of live life a little bit easier. Had gay friends in our gay clubs. I was living on my own, paying my own bills, which was great. I was completely independent. And then the Remicade started to lose its efficacy, even though I was getting the infusions. So they decided to try me on the injections. Humira is the brand name in America. And that sort of worked all right, but things were starting to kind of rumble again. And by this time, they'd said, right, you have Crohn's disease. There's no way around it because the biopsies that we've done have shown some tissue. And so I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll live life as I can, and I'm getting the injections. I'm doing those myself. and they're keeping things under control to a degree. But I go back to the cowboy and I say, right, let's get rid of this fistula. I'm sick and tired of having it. I'm sick and tired of being on medicines that, do come with some long-term side effects. And so this is when I'm going to get my first ostomy. And I was completely prepared for it because it was going to be temporary. It would give me, some bowel rest. And so I go in, we have the surgery. Surgery's gone well. I have the ostomy. Takes a little while for me to kind of get used to, just because it's so new. But it did sort of, change my body image from being, someone who took their top off at the club, was happy just to dance around, to being a bit more conservative with my body image. And dating and hookups were they were kind of out of the question, just because I didn't know how gay men would, react to that. For the period of about a year, it kind of I backed off. Meanwhile, on the flip side, the ostomy made me feel really good. I was able to eat a lot more. I was able to have more energy. I was going to the gym. I was like, hey, this is actually pretty good. But I knew that it would be temporary, so they reversed that. Unfortunately, the fistula opened back up. Things kind of went back to the way they were, and they were kind of manageable. Had another surgery that sort of kind of helps things. All the while, it's just the slow, steady progression towards, where I ended up. So decided to go to Paris. I was like, I need a holiday. Went to Paris, met my ex. Um, it was, love at first sight. I ended up moving over to Belfast very shortly after that. Moved over 16 years ago and was able to kind of get the humour on the NHS through kind of a process of applying for that. And that was really good because I didn't have to worry about paying for it anymore, And so, again, it kind of helped control things for about a year. And then things just kind of started going south. Started getting a really bad infection in my rear end. Couldn't sit down again. Was clearly abscess there. Spoke to the surgeon and they said, right, what we're going to do is we're just going to close off the J pouch that you have. We'll give you an ostomy. And at this point, I was like, right, just do whatever. I'd already had the ostomy before, knew what was involved, was ready to move on. So it was planned. And then just one point, I couldn't take it. I was starting to get a fever. I went to the A&E. Surgeon came in and said, right, we need to get this fixed. You're getting it tomorrow. I was like, God, I've never been so eager to have surgery in my life. But this was like, okay, I know that life is going to change after this for the better. So I go into go in to have surgery, and they're like, right, well, we're going to give you an epidural for pain relief afterwards. And I'm thinking, okay, women get epidurals all the time for C-sections. I can do this. And they told me, they were like, right, you're going to need to sit up. I'm like, I can't sit. This is why I'm having this surgery. They're like, you're going to have to grin and bear it. The pain from my rear end was more on my mind than the needle going in my back. At that point, I thought, in a few hours, I'll wake up, this be done and dusted. Fortunately, everything went well. It was great. I wake up and I'm thinking, okay, now here we go. And I was so determined to get out of there. I refused pain medicine. I was like, give me paracetamol. I was like, when can I get up and walk? Like, when can I get out of this bed? They were like, well, we're going to have to take the epidural out first. It's like, when's that going to happen? So I think I might have spent 5 or 6 days in hospital, but that's only because they wouldn't let me go. And I'm thinking, I need to get out of here. And so since then, life has been really good. Life's been really, really good. The ostomy that I have has really allowed me to pursue my career as a pastry chef. I can stand on my feet for hours on end. I can pretty much eat what I want now that I've kind of figured out what I can and cannot eat. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to where I am today. It's not been easy. I've got scars kind of everywhere, my neck, my arms, my belly, my back end, but it's given me a resilience that I know that I would not have gotten otherwise. And yeah, I think it's just kind of time to help spread that sort of message of you can get through this, talk to other people about my story, what this ileostomy means for me and what it's allowed me to do. So that's where we are. That's a bit of my background.
Daniel, you have been through torture for many, many years. Oh my God, over and back, and to go through reversal. That's something I definitely want to touch on too. You got a real education in grit is the best way I could describe it. My God, it's so much to navigate, from such a young age and moving and meeting and moving countries and different health systems. So much, so much. I know you mentioned that once you got a good period of health, like in my own mind, the shackles come off and you're like, all right, I get to go and live life. And then unfortunately, your health deteriorated again. How is your health now?
My health now has been really good. I have literally had no problems since I've had the ostomy. There have been a couple of incidents where I think I might be more susceptible to getting like a gastro disease or gastro infection. And that I've had probably 4 bouts of a gastro vomiting bug since I've had the ostomy. And that really hits hard. It really, really will hit hard because you don't have the colon to kind of help slow things down a little bit. You get dehydrated extremely quickly. The last one I had was at the tail end of when I had COVID. The COVID was actually a walk in the park. The day that I got the gastrobug or whatever it was, I ended up in hospital. Had to go in, get fluids. They had to keep me in. It was horrible. So that's something I'm very acutely aware of, is avoiding any sort of infection with that. But apart from those bouts of problems, I've not had any issues. And that's kind of why I have always said I might or might not have Crohn's. There's never been a 100% definitive answer because all the problems that I really have were located really within the pouch. So it's I tell people I have Crohn's because it's easier than having to go into the the history of this happened and this happened and that happened and then the doctor said, "Oh, here's your real diagnosis."
In the sense of getting the infections, the gastro infections, are you on any autoimmune drugs at the moment?
No, I actually don't take anything, which is surprising because I haven't had any flare ups. I haven't had any cramps. I haven't had anything to prevent active disease. And since before the ileostomy, that was the last time I took anything.
What year did you
So
get the ileostomy?
I got that in 2010, so 15 years ago. Yeah.
Long may the run of health continue. Absolutely, it's amazing to hear.
Yeah, I hope so. I really, really hope so. You know, it has been the thing that has stopped everything in its tracks. And so I'm really hoping that this is a permanent solution, you know, for me to look back and think, you know, if I had been told at age 16, if you have an ileostomy, you may not ever have another problem again. I probably would have jumped at the chance, knowing if I had known what I was going to face going forward. At 16, I would have thrown my hands up and said, "Yes, absolutely, give it to me." You know, and so yeah, history's what it is.
Yeah,
But
it's very easy to reflect, and hindsight's 2020 and all that. Absolutely, but as you said, it kind of wasn't really your choice at that stage. They did a surgery that you weren't expecting, is what I gather from it.
yes,
And
that's correct. You know, I was told in the consultations from by the surgeon, we will place a temporary ileostomy while your bowel heals from, the J pouch, just to kind of give everything a rest. And I thought, okay, yeah, great. And I think my physical health, apart from the ulcerative colitis, worked against me because I was so
Mhm.
fit, physically able to do many things. I had been a lifeguard up until a few weeks before I had surgery. I was fairly healthy. So yeah, I kind of wish I had been a bit sicker so that they would have had to have done the ostomy, but fortunately not.
Yeah, of course, you could be thinking like, oh, I could have avoided so many problems, but I know it's very easy to say this afterwards. But you have had a resoundingly successful ostomy surgery, which is amazing. I listened to your video that you spoke on your page, on the Lazy Claire page, and also how you speak there. It's just resoundingly positive experience the last 15 years, thank God. Just for a moment, I want to take a break from the pod to speak to you about Ostique Connect from Sol's Healthcare. One of the hardest things about living with a stoma or living with IBD can be the isolation that comes with it. I know from my own experience, chronic illness can be a very lonely place. I've been very vocal about the effect it had on me in my teenage years and how my actual fear of getting a stoma and living life with a bag nearly ended up me not being here today. If I'd had a way to connect with other people who were living with IBD or they were living with a stoma, I could have learned from their lived experience. It would have eased so much the fear of what I was going through. Connecting and learning from another is exactly why I started this podcast, which is why I want to tell you about Ostique Connect by Salts. It's the first ever peer-to-peer support app for people who are managing gut health conditions. So whether you have a stoma now, maybe you'll have one in the future, or you've had one in the past, Ostique Connect has a bespoke algorithm that helps you meet people from all over the world. People who've been on a similar journey to your own. So through the app, you can make supportive connections and you can have one-to-one conversations. It also gives you the chance to join forums and connect with a larger group of people. You can ask and you can answer any questions that arise. It's a great place to provide support in a safe space. And there's also helpful blogs and there's podcast episodes too. Osteek Connect by Salt is available to download via the Apple App Store and Google Play. So if you want to check it out, click the links in the episode description or simply search Osteek Connect. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode. Could you dive into what I know you said you were eager to get the surgery, and it's so funny. I've never heard anyone say they're eager to get the surgery, but I completely get where you're coming from. Could you speak to us on probably what were the biggest adjustments for you post surgery?
So when I got my first ostomy, the biggest adjustment was figuring out what to eat. That was probably the biggest one for me, is because I love food. I'm a big foodie, and I've always loved eating salads. I've always loved eating vegetables, and I'm sure that there's a lot of your viewers who are going to be cringing in fear and pain just at the thought of a mushroom or a carrot. Well, I'm completely the opposite. I and by no means a vegetarian, but having grown up in the South, when you have your meat and your two veg, I love vegetables of any kind. The first, meal that I had, I think it might have been mushrooms, and it got blocked. And I'm on the phone with my mom going, "Nothing's coming out. I'm in pain. What do I do?" And of course, she's never really dealt with this in a child, so she suggests maybe getting some suppositories, and she says, "Put it through the ostomy just to see if it will help." And I was like, "What? This is crazy." But mom's a nurse. She knows really what to do. So I tried that, not much luck because it's behind the abdominal wall. I think I kind of had to just kind of massage things to help move them. So I learned my lesson with that. But after that, I kind of avoided anything that wouldn't cook down. I would cook my vegetables a lot softer carrots, softer everything to kind of help, but that was a big change. Having been someone who was not afraid to take a shirt off in the club, happy to dance around, and enjoy life. I did not want to do that. And then I had no idea how I would hide that underneath clothes. I had to figure out, right, how do I slimline my silhouette? And I remember wearing a pair of biker shorts like up high over them, and that kind of slimmed things down a bit. And so that gave me confidence to go back out. And then I was at the club and I met someone, and I was like, pretty much into him. And he asked me, he's like, "Oh, I don't know how we got on the topic." I said, "Yeah, I have Crohn's." And he's like, "Oh, well, do you have an ileostomy?" I was like, "No, I don't." And this is so weird because this is the kind of self-image that you want to project when you're, a gay man. You want to still be sexy. And I mean, I guess that's universal for anybody. Anybody still wants to be sexy, but how do you navigate that with someone who you've only just met and you're clearly attracted to and they're attracted to you? And it just kind of fell out of my mouth. We go back to my house. I was like, "Right, if you want to sleep in the bed, you can. I'll sleep on the sofa." Well, he's attractive, and
The nature of the beast.
Nature of the beast. I've had a few drinks, so I go in. I'm like, "Right, look, I need to tell you something." I was like, "I wasn't honest with you about the ileostomy." He's like, "Well, I didn't think you were, but I don't really care." I was like, "Okay, great." And after that night, I felt a lot better about my self-image. That was a big boost, and so I still didn't take my top off in public, but I did wear this costume at Halloween that was like right just above where my ostomy bag would have shown. And I went as the god Apollo, and I had put gold leaf all over my body. And the like toga, as it were, was like gold. And I had my top off. And it was really cool because I had figured out how to hide what I wanted to hide, but go out and enjoy a great Halloween, and it was such good fun. And after that, I thought, okay, I can do this. I can be a sexy gay man, with an ostomy. My friends were really supportive, and I had a really good best friend who was very supportive as well. And so, yeah, that's just what helped the things adjust, getting out of my own head and realizing that people aren't looking at me going, "Oh, I can see his ileostomy." And at that point, it was kind of like, I don't really care. And then having the second one was like going back to the first one. The only tricky thing that I had to figure out was that the base plate that I used when I was younger was manufactured in a different country, and I was allergic to the base plate here, even though it's exactly the same sort of material. And that left me with some really bad skin irritation. And so I had to go to something different. And I was like, "Oh my Lord." I was like, I can't believe that was the simplest solution, is that I was actually just having an allergic reaction. I thought I was, I had no idea what was going on. And after that, I had already been with my ex-partner, so we were together. I didn't really have to worry too much about body image, but it was still there. It still affects you, and it's a new person who's dealing with, your own new body. But he was very supportive and very, very helpful. And, that didn't really, it didn't come up. It didn't come up as an issue. And the body image was actually even more improved because I went to the stoma nurse and she said, right, we need to get you in some hernia support pants. And this garment like comes like pretty high on you. And I thought there is no way I'm wearing that. It looked like a corset, like a girdle. I was like, I don't she's like, just try it on. Just see what it's like. I slip it on and I'm thinking, hold up, like this slims me down. This You can barely see the ostomy through it. And I think, hold up, this is really, really good. This is great. And so I still wear the same kind to this day. I can tuck my shirt in and a nice button up. There's very little line there. And I'm thinking, okay, I can look great in clothes with this hernia support garment on. I'm sure if I were to take my clothes off, people would be like, why are you wearing a girdle?
Because I feel like it. All right, leave me
Because
alone.
I feel like it. I look really sexy in this slim, this slimming garment. But I've come to realize that, it does serve a dual purpose, helping prevent a hernia and helping support the ostomy, but also giving me a really good silhouette. I'm really happy to wear it. I can wear, I wouldn't say skin tight clothes, but, really slim clothes. And so that's really been a positive for my body image as well. And so that's been good. And then coming out of a relationship and going back into the kind of the gay world and being on some of the sites and apps and things like that, that's been interesting because you don't know how people are going to react. And I just put it out there to say, this is me. You either accept me or you don't, and leave it up to everybody else. And it's been very positive. Feeling very sexy these days for 45. I'm feeling pretty good. So, you know, long may it continue, although I don't know how much longer, the body will continue once I age up there. I might have to retire at some point. But, I feel like I've really come into myself within the past year or so, with my body image, and even over the past few years, I've been able to work out a bit more because I've got the support for the hernia, and that improves my body image as well. Because there's one picture of me from when I was about 21. I'm at the beach. I'm standing next to a friend, and this is before this is while I'm on the Remicade. I'm so skinny. I'm really, really skinny, and I never wanted to be that skinny. And I enjoy working out. I enjoy being physical. And so when I could, I took the opportunity and I started, muscle training and doing that. And that has been really good to help see my body grow and be able to do that, even though I have an ostomy. So that's been very good about that journey, and all those adaptations have gotten me to where I
100%. Like body image is something that every human we suffer with completely. And then when you are put into a position where your own body is not how it looks in the mirror and how you would actually a normal presentation of how a body should look, and there's so much of an adjustment to that. In the sense of, we all know intimacy has two ways: there's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy. How do you broach that topic with a new partner when it comes to I suppose meeting someone new, dating, that type of thing?
at this point, it's just out there. It's one of the first things, because if that person is going to have an issue with it, that's their issue, and it's on them. And it's almost kind of like, well, they're not worth my time because I can't change. There's nothing I can do to change the fact that I have an ostomy. I can explain it, I can educate people, but at the end of the day, it's their choice whether they're going to be accepting of this body. Statistically, there's a lot of people out there who have this body, and I've been messaged by two or three other gay men who also have an ostomy. Actually say thank you very much for showing that, because I have one and I don't like it. And I remember one gentleman who was saying, I really hate it. And I'm thinking, this is something that has helped save your life. It's a part of you. It's something that you will have to deal with for the rest of your life. I hopefully will have it for the rest of my life. I want it for the rest of my life because it has given me the life that I have. And that's how I see it. And so At this point, I don't I don't pay two minds to anybody who has an issue with it, because as you said in your other podcasts, the people who mind won't care, and the people who care won't mind. Or I probably got that wrong, but you know the gist of
I
it.
do, I do, I
The
do, of course.
the people who do mind, you shouldn't pay any mind to, and so I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think twice about them. But there's been plenty of other people who have
Yeah.
completely overlooked it, and I've had some really good relationships through that, and still do. So I understand that that's hard. That's really hard for some people to come to grips with that for themselves. But this is something that will improve your life, hopefully. And hopefully, it will give you a bit of life back, or a bit more life, because that's what this disease does. Is it takes something from you, and it saps your energy. It saps your it just takes and takes and takes, and it is a vicious circle with this disease. And anything that you can do to be more well is a better step. There are people who won't be 75%, and they get up to 80, 85% of where they want to be. That's still a step forward if you have this ostomy, and it helps you to get there. It will help you to live a bit more life. That's the balance that you have to think about. Is okay, this is my body image, but this is something that is helping me live life, as opposed to that horrible life that I was living before. And if you explain it like that to someone, and you're matter of fact, and you tell them this is something that I embrace, they'll understand that. Most people will understand that. Of course, there's going to be people who just can't get their head around it. Move on from those people. Just let them go, find someone else to talk to. And so that's a process, though. It's definitely a process for everybody, and sometimes it takes a few months, sometimes it takes a few years. But don't hate your body because you're moving forward to make it better and to make it well.
Absolutely. And I know earlier I was trying to think what was the phrase again, but it's those who matter won't care, and those who care about it won't matter. And it's a
Yes.
beautiful phrase that really, really sings across how, the right people will come into your life and accept, and they'll know your story and understand that this is the thing that allows you to be you and be alive, and how beautiful a thing it is that allows us to actually live a life, and a good life, which you can hear it in your voice. Like life is good. You've learned so much from your experience, and thank God you're still here to tell the story, which is amazing. Just in the sense of physical intimacy, have you had a proctectomy?
No, I have not.
Just in that sense, is there any kind of, so if someone who is a young gay man and might be heading into proctectomy surgery and might feel it might be a block to intimacy going forward, is there any kind of messaging you would feel you'd have for them?
Talk to your doctor. Talk to your surgeon. Understand the risks, the benefits. My surgeon actually recommended that we leave the J pouch where it is, because I've already had some surgery back there. I'll put my hands up. I'm 45. I've had a J pouch. I have a bit of erectile dysfunction because there's been surgery going on back there. I'm also getting older, and so the muscles down there don't work as well as they used to, but because of nerve damage, that's there. And that is a risk. Especially, it's much more concerning for a younger person, because that's something that they will need to live with for a longer period of time. And it is a very real concern, because it's an extremely delicate area where they are doing surgery. And so it's absolutely worth speaking to your surgeon and understanding that they know the risks that you will face. And so it's also worth understanding that even if your pouch remains, it's probably not a good idea to, putting this delicately, be the passive partner. And people have asked me, can we do it? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. There's no way. That's just not an option. And you kind of have to explain why. And I think people kind of scratch their heads, because it's not a very common surgery that I have had. It's not something that people hear about. And so it's tricky. It's something, but it's something that people need to talk about, and understand about their bodies. Especially if you're a gay man going into this kind of surgery, understand the risks that you're going to face. Understand the benefits of the surgeries. Having an ostomy doesn't really, it doesn't really present any difficulty for having sex. It might kind of get in the way a little bit. You can kind of feel it here and there, but it's not that big a deal, and again, when you're being intimate with someone, it's not really the first thing that's on your mind. It's more present in my mind probably than the other person, but there's ways around it. There are support belts. There's things that you can wear to help keep it in place if you don't want it to be moving. And so and and for people who are, post surgery and they're still healing from scarring, there's positions, that you can work out. There's communication with your partner is the key thing to say, look, I'm still healing. This isn't comfortable for me. And most people, when you communicate that like that with them, are very understanding. And if you're having this kind of good communication before and during, it's going to be better, and you're going to learn. Yeah. And of course, there's going to be times where things don't go right. My bag leaked once in the middle of it, and that was kind of like, how are we going to deal with this? Just matter of fact, and got through it and just moved on. And it didn't prevent me from seeing that person again, thankfully. It's no different from having a leak at night, and you just clean up and move on. And so I don't know if it's harder for gay men to deal with an ostomy than it is for straight people, but they're both going to face challenges with intimacy, and you will face them. A lot of those challenges are going to be in your own head.
The words out of my mouth there,
They
yeah.
are going to be in your own head. And once you get through that and just say, F this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put myself out there. People will admire your courage and your willingness just to be body positive, because we do, I'm so thankful that we are evolving into, a people who see that there's completely different bodies, there's completely different presentations. Getting your ostomy out, showing people, you can wear a Speedo with an ostomy. Personally, like wearing a Speedo, but I get it out when I'm at the beach, and when you see someone at the beach and you fancy them, if they were to turn around and have an ostomy, you'd like, whoa, that's pretty courageous, and they're sexy, so even better. So haven't quite gotten to the point where I take my top off in the club anymore. I think I'm a bit old for that. But the thought of it's nice, and if I saw someone dancing across the room with their top off and they had an ostomy, I'd probably go over and say, good for you. Good for you for showing that, people with an ostomy can still be sexy, and that, body confidence really does come from within.
I think the energy, you can decide someone else's opinion on something by the energy that comes from you, and the more negative energy you give to something and the more you recluse into yourself about it, other people will then be a little bit maybe negative or apprehensive about approaching a subject with you. I feel the more open, honest and confident we are about it, which isn't just easy. You can't just flip a switch and say, oh, I'm really confident now or whatever, but it takes time and putting yourself in these situations where you can allow yourself to build the confidence. And as you said, like, it's very admirable to see someone who's able to be themselves unashamedly and, have the top off. We all want to have that level of confidence, and when you be yourself, I think that confidence comes, and it's a beautiful message to pass across to people. Now, I definitely will give your bakery a shout out and talk to people about your career. I think that would be a good thing to do, because I saw that croissant. So if I'm in Belfast, I'm coming for a croissant. That's a fact.
Definitely. Give me a shout. Yeah.
I'd just like to dive into the incredible career that you've built as a pastry chef. Could you dive into that a little bit for us?
That has really come down to me having this ostomy. I can absolutely say that my career is because of that. And people might be scratching their heads saying, how are the two of these connected? So when I had my surgery, it allowed me to get back to living life and being able to eat more foods that I wanted to eat. And I have always been a massive foodie. I've always had the dream of being a chef. And so living here and getting into the cafe culture, I started off in a greasy spoon as a waiter, front of house, and they had an opening for a chef. I said, well, how, I'm sure I can do a few shifts. Got back there, started doing those, was on my feet just hours and hours. And at the start, it was really hard. But as you do it more, you just get used to it. The ostomy really helped because everything had calmed down. I wasn't having to rush to the toilet. I wasn't in pain. Stand on my feet, had much more endurance, much more energy. And so then I thought, right, if I want to become a more professional chef, I need to go to a more professional restaurant. So I took my CV and went around to a few places and walked in the door of this one place. And they said, right, yeah, we're looking for a chef. Can you come back for a trial shift? Went in for the trial shift, and it was in the pastry section. I've always loved pastries. I've always loved making cookies and things like that. And so I'm on this pastry section and we're making creme brulees, and it's like, this is really interesting. This is really precise. This is really a lot of attention to detail. And the chef comes back and he's like, "Well, how was your trial?" I was like, "It's great. I really enjoyed it." And we're talking like 10:30 at night before I'm about to go home because it's the end of the pastry service. And he's like, "Right, we're happy to have you on." And so I jump on and I'm in the pastry section in this restaurant. And we're talking long hours. We're talking really long hours. I think I went in at 10 a.m. and some days I wouldn't get out till like 11, nearly 12 o'clock at night. And just really found my element. Pastry was for me. I loved how precise it was. I loved how much planning went into it. And then they were going to get a new chef in and move me up to the front of the line where you do more of the savory stuff. And I said, "Nope, nope, no, no, no. I'm happy to stay here." And I think they all started scratching their heads going, "Is this kid okay?" I said, "No, I'm really happy where I am." And then the restaurant shut down a few months later. And by that point, we had already decided that we were going to move to Paris. My ex-partner was going to go to theater school. I was going to be a pastry chef. And so we get over there. Things are not quite as easy and straightforward as I thought they would be with my immigration. The French love paperwork. And so I was in limbo for the period of about 2 months. I couldn't work. So I'm sitting here trying to sort everything out. And don't tell anybody when I was getting my ostomy supplies shipped over from the UK. They'll probably come and knock my door for that.
We need
But
those 100 bags back, please.
I know I was trying to get on the French system so that I could get these bags. So you get over there and you finally get your visa. I finally got my visa, and I go to this place that's right around the corner from where my partner was working. He was working in an Irish bar. One night, some chefs come in. He's like, "There's some chefs here that I think they're pastry chefs." I was like, "Right, go over and ask them who I need to speak to." And they tell me the head chef's name. Now, if anybody's familiar with French culture, you never address a stranger by their first name. It's Monsieur, Madame, whatever. Now, this place is quite famous. I walk in the front door, and we're talking like gloved waiters, like black tie, tea room. I say, "Can I speak to Christoph?" They must have been looking at me like I had four heads because, like, I must be acting like I know this guy, the head chef. He comes out and speaks to me and says, "Right, bring me your CV and we'll talk." And so I go in and I have a meeting with him, and he says, "Right, there's an opening. A girl has fallen and broken her foot. You can come in and cover for her." And I'm thinking, absolutely. It sucked for her, but it was great news for me. And so I go in, and this is kind of over the Christmas period. I had a temporary contract, and it was a whole new world, the whole new world. Had to wear a hairnet, had to wear the chef's hat, had to go in and just work, 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 work. I had no idea really where I was starting. Fortunately, I had done a lot of French in university, so I wasn't lost, but my French wasn't quite to that level. So I was really having to understand, why are they calling a mixing bowl a cul de poule, which literally means a chicken's butt. I was like, I can't get my head around these words. This is not what I learned. But I was loving it. I was absolutely loving working there. Everything was exact. The recipes were right up my alley because they were so organized. And it was, yes, it was repetitive, but you're improving your skills as you're repeating these things. And I went from temporary contract to temporary contract to temporary contract. And finally I said, "Look, when are you going to give me a permanent contract? Because I really enjoy being here." And by the time they finally gave me one, it was pretty much time to come back to Belfast. And so I was really torn because I kind of wanted to stay in Paris, but my partner was moving back here. And so I moved back, left all that behind, and started working in cafes again because of what I knew from before, and started working on a business plan. I said, "Right, it's time to get this pastry idea off the ground for myself. Belfast needs a patisserie." And so worked in cafes for the next 5 years. And then I got a phone call from mom, and she told me that she had found a lump in her esophagus. And the world works in weird circles. And so the GI doctor, Dr. White, never forget his face or his name, the one that diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis, diagnosed mom with esophageal cancer. But I was really happy that he was her doctor because I knew how caring and loving, he was as a person. And so I had to kind of drop all the cafe stuff and go back, be there for mom when she had surgery. She had her stomach removed. She had part of her esophagus removed, and the roles were completely reversed. She was sitting in the hospital bed, and I was her nurse because that's what she did for me when I was sick. And I just kind of looked at her and was just so appreciative of everything that she had done for me. And unfortunately, she passed away a few months later, and it was really hard because I really lost a best friend. The mom was very smart, and she put away a good nest egg, and I knew immediately what I was going to do. I knew that the decision to open a patisserie with what she had left for me was the right decision. And so everybody must think, oh, your mom's name is Claire. It's not Claire. Her name was Susan. And so the day mom died was February the 27th. So 227, as we write it in America. And the space that we are in is 227 Castlereagh Road. And so I don't believe in coincidences anymore. As a matter of fact, Angelina in Paris, their address was 226. So that, I'm not a woo-woo sort of person, but it's kind of hard to, ignore the signs when they're flashing in your face. And so, yeah, it was 8 years ago that I looked at the space and said, yep, that's the one for me. So went in, renovated the space, not knowing how it would do, not knowing the location, but I knew that I was very confident in the product that I would bring to Belfast, confident in my ability to learn, my ability to, be resilient, because that's what this disease has taught me. And that's what having an ostomy has taught me, is to be resilient and just to plow forward and live life and to take risks. And we opened, and it was a really big success. And then things were hard. COVID hit. We had to close for a while. And I just was just extremely doggedly determined to keep it going. And after that, business got really good. And if anything, the pandemic was a boon for us because there was queues of people around the door because you couldn't sit in, and we got more noticed. And I was honing techniques and really discovering more things about being a pastry chef than I ever knew. And I'm still learning to this day. I still love it. It is a challenge, and some days it's a headache. But then you get to the point where you come second place in a croissant competition for Northern Ireland just 2 days ago. And that's a really big, exciting thing. And it still makes it worthwhile. And you're training people. I have two former employees who work in London, one for a very famous French pastry chef who opened his place in London, and she works for him. And I'm seeing the work that she does, and I'm thinking that's amazing that she has gone to that level after having worked with us. And then one works down in Ballymaloe teaching bread and pastries in their bread shed, and that's also a really good feeling. And the first place winner is a former chef of mine, so I helped him learn how to make croissants. And I think, I am jealous that I didn't win first place, but I helped him to do that. That's a really good feeling. And I never take it for granted. I never take this pastry role for granted. I'm there to help train and teach people, and it's so rewarding. And that's, the legacy that my mom left for me and that I want to build for her. And I literally could not have done any of that if I did not have this ostomy, because it has allowed me to fly back and forth multiple times to have to help settle things with mom's estate, or to, deal with things after my father passed away. And, it's allowed me to go on, really great trips and holidays. And I would never swap this ostomy for anything, for what might be considered normal. Nope, I would never go back to that, because it wasn't normal. I was in pain. I was in, no energy. The life that I have now is really good. It's really good. And so that is how having this surgery has gotten me to where I am now, and now I don't even think twice about it. It's just part of who I am. It's just part of everyday life, and it's just me. That's just who I am. And yeah, I'm grateful for the journey that has allowed me to go on.
Just me is a beautiful statement because it's so authentic and it means you're happy in the body that you're in. And first of all, I just want to say I'm so sorry to hear about your mum, because it sounds like from what you've told me, you have amazing grit, and your mother seemed to, I think you might have inherited it from your mother. Sounds like a woman who had amazing grit too.
Yeah.
The fact that she worked so hard, left this nest egg, which you have allowed to turn into a legacy, is just such a beautiful way to honour her memory. And I think it's an amazing thing that you've done. Yeah, I kind of lost words a little bit, because I know that in my own life, my mother has been there for me through all those hard times in the hospitals, and I can only imagine what it was like to have that role reversed. And like it's powerful what you've done since. So absolutely fair play to you. Is there any message you'd like to get across? I know we've hit every single topic that I wanted to bring up today. You've been an amazing guest. For anyone who might find themselves, they've seen a lot of parallels in their own situation and what they might be going through or have gone through. Is there any message you'd like to give them?
I think probably the one thing that I'd like to say is, this is a journey. You will go through peaks and valleys. You will feel very dark and low at points. And I remember being in pain as a teenager and just thinking, I just want this to stop. I just want this to end. You know, and looking back, I don't know if I would say that I was depressed. I think I was just sick and tired of being really, sick and tired and just depleted and just in a very vulnerable state. And we have a lot more resources to talk about it now. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it with your parents, talk about it with your friends. Tell them that, this is really shit. It's not fun, but it can get better. If you're on drugs that are not really working, speak to your doctor, speak to them and try to figure out a different regime of things that you might be able to try. And if you're putting off surgery because you don't want to have to deal with the pain of the surgery, but yet it might lead to something better, really weigh those risks and those benefits. Because the pain from surgery, it gets a lot less. The scars soften, the scars fade, and then you have a new life that you can live a bit more full. And it may not be a life that's just all roses and happy days every single day. You may have some flare ups, but if it's a little bit better than what it was before, that's what you need to aim for. In my job, I think, right, how do we make things just a bit better than they were a few days ago? And you have to learn, new techniques and you have to really reevaluate. And it's the same for a disease. How can you figure out what makes you feel more healthy or more whole? Is it cooking your vegetables a different way? Is it eliminating something from your diet? Is it adding something to your diet? Is it speaking to your doctor about different treatments? Is it talking to your friends to help your mental health a bit better? There's always something that will help you feel better, whether it's mentally, physically, spiritually. Don't think that you're stuck. You're not stuck. There is a way forward to help you be a more whole person. And I think one thing that, that really struck me from listening to your first podcast with your mom, there were a lot of parallels there. And your mom wasn't alone at not knowing what to do. My mom was a nurse, and there were moments where she didn't know what to do for me. Be there for your kids, hold them, love them, just let them know that it will be okay. Because without that parental support, kids can feel lost because they don't know what's going on. And educate yourself on absolutely everything that you can do for your children. Look at different therapies and look especially at mental health, because it's not only just for the patient, it's also the parents who are probably in loads of anguish at seeing their child in pain. And that's really hard. And that's really hard for parents to see. That's one thing that I would also want to leave with.
100%. I think, as you're saying, 1% better is still better. And every day, if you can just put something in place to try and just improve the next day, even a tiny bit, however small increment that might be, it's like increment over increment, 1%, eventually will turn into something tangible. So I think there's a great message to get across in the sense of everything you've come through now. You are an absolute testament to what it is to have true grit, to power through things. What does happiness look like to you?
Happiness it's when I listen to this song, this CD. Well, it's not even a CD anymore because you can't get them. It's listening to this music that I listened to when I was sick, when I was 15, and knowing how much hope and how much joy is in that music that I can look back and see how far I've come. It's that music for me. Music is a very big source of happiness for me. And a lot of that music that I listened to while I was in the hospital gives me that happiness now. Knowing the journey that I've been on and how resilient it has made me. And the happiness is also being able to live life a bit more fully than I ever was before, and not taking things for granted, not taking my health for granted, which I am guilty of because I have had such a long period of health, but yeah, so that's those are the things that make me happy, and that how I would define my happiness.
And like as you said with songs, I find the things that give you hope in those dark moments. I know, and I guess Ellie Howe said hope is as good as any strong medicine, especially finding your hope to keep you persevering through times that just, when all hope seems lost, is just trying to find that glimmer of light to keep you powering through. So thank you so much for your message today, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. And I just want to say a massive thank you to Daniel for sharing so openly and so honestly. Really was a truly insightful episode, and I really enjoyed speaking to him. Thank you again to Salt for the support. And we'll be back again next week for episode 14.